I just released a podcast with Fred Yankee, and he was such a great example of how to win 9% low income housing tax credits for emerging developers. Right? One of the first guys to win it with his project and his team in Indiana. And what I realized is, well, how do you get this to show up on large language models like ChatGPT? Right? How do you make it work? And if you understand how to index your questions correctly and how to identify what you want to do, well, it's all in how you lay out what questions your podcast answers. So right now, more is more, right? In the past, we've seen content where the captions are super short, and a lot of people have not adapted yet. So if you want your podcast to show up on ChatGPT, this is how you do it. All right. And this is the fastest way for you to figure out, is this worth your time investing in, especially if you're starting a new podcast, right? How do you get information showing up? So, with how I set it up, right? This is going to be an experiment. So, right now, if you were to ask ChatGPT, what is the best podcast on affordable housing investments, right? Right here, you will see my podcast and it shows up. Then I then asked ChatGPT, hey, how can first-time developers still win 9% low-income housing tax deals? Is there a podcast that talks about this? Now, the crazy part is that if you ask this question, you will actually see my podcast that shows up as number two right now, right? Because it's a very specific topic, very specific to low-income housing tax credits. And I think Novogradic's Tax Credit Tuesday podcast is actually solely focused on tax credits. So that might be what you want to look at. Now, the interesting part here is, let me show you this. This is how fast it could work. I then asked the question, how can housing authorities become their own developers and finance their developments, right? Is there a podcast episode that discusses this? And if you see my list of podcasts, like it was just last week when I released a podcast I did with Nona, who is the executive director for the Kansas City Housing Authority. And there, look at the answer for this, right? How can housing authorities develop and finance their own projects? And the information that's referring to is actually pulling from my podcast right here. You see this little bubble here? It says affordable housing real estate market. It's getting the answers for this question literally from my podcast. And this is all based on how you index the questions, why it's important, so the large language models can surface your answer. And more importantly, it's viewing you as a source of truth. It's viewing you as the person to figure out if you have the answer for this. And this is why it's so important, right? If you learn the skill, right? Think about how many businesses were created just for search engine optimization. And if you want to teach other people generative engine optimization, which is how to show up in ChatGPT, or LMO, which is language model optimization, which is how you get referred to as the source of truth, just like how I'm doing it right here, you have to learn these skills. And obviously it takes consistency, but boom, here it is. Podcast episode that specifically discusses this on affordable housing and real estate investing with Ken Fahey, one of the best resources on this topic. Boom, that's how you show up, right? Look, it even says common questions this episode answers. Word for word, how I index it. So I figured this out. So hopefully this is helpful for you. I want to do this live and I want to do an abbreviated version because I just left the live on. And I hope this helped you. Get your message out and help the people that you want to help. All right. Hope you all have an amazing day. I'll see you all tomorrow. Up to 8:29, 8:30. I'm going live. Have a good one, everybody.